Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot into the desert night, where the air feels crisp but the sand still holds the warmth of the day. Above you, the sky is so black and endless it almost feels like you could fall upward into it. A half-moon hangs low, glinting against the endless sea of stone blocks stacked into a shape so sharp, so impossible, you almost laugh. You're standing at the foot of the Great Pyramid of Giza, yeah, the one that's been confusing, amazing, and sometimes frustrating experts for over 4,500 years. Just imagine, back when your ancestors were still figuring out bronze, someone here was piling up millions of stones taller than skyscrapers. You probably won't survive this building project. Like, literally, no human alive today could handle that kind of back-breaking, decades-long labor. But you get the fun version. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You look up again at that slope of stone disappearing into the stars. The pyramid doesn't just sit in the desert, it looms, it dominates. Even today, surrounded by buzzing tourist buses and souvenir stands, it carries a weight that hushes you. Imagine this sight in 2600 BCE, no city skyline, no neon lights, just an enormous, gleaming white mountain of limestone rising out of golden sand. Ancient writers said it was so polished it could blind you at dawn, like a man-made sun. And you, squinting now, can almost feel the glare. The desert wind brushes your face, and the grains of sand sting slightly at your ankles. Somewhere out there, jackals howl, but here you only hear your own breathing, slowed by awe. You start to walk, slowly, circling the pyramid's massive base. Each side stretches longer than 2 football fields. That's right, each blocky wall is 755 feet wide. Your neck cranes as you realize it was once 481 feet tall. You imagine an apartment tower plunked down in the Bronze Age, except this one had no elevators, no scaffolding, no cranes. Just ropes, sweat, and some very stubborn dreamers. Now, here's a mainstream fact that still blows your mind. The Great Pyramid is made of about 2.3 million stone blocks. Each one weighs between 2 and 15 tons. That's like moving an SUV millions of times. And the wildest part? The builders finished the whole thing in maybe 20 years. Pause here, 20 years to move millions of blocks, shape them, set them with incredible precision. Your Netflix backlog has been around longer than that. But not everything is neat fact and clarity. There's a fringe tidbit whispered in the desert breeze. Some believe the pyramid was never just a tomb. Maybe it was a giant energy machine, a symbolic map of the stars, or even a storage vessel for knowledge. You shake your head, half amused, half unsettled. Because, even if you don't buy the wild theories, you admit the thing feels like more than a pile of rocks. It's humming. Not literally, but in your bones. You keep walking, the moonlight gliding along the pyramid's edges. Your shadow stretches long. The blocks tower above you, each one taller than your waist. You touch the stone, cool, pitted, and stubbornly silent. Then you think of the debate. Historians still argue whether ramps alone could have done this, or if there were ingenious pulleys, counterweights, or even water channels. Nobody agrees. Nobody fully knows. That uncertainty tickles your imagination. As you trail your hand along the wall, you picture the workers, thousands of them, arriving here each dawn, their sandals raising clouds of dust. You imagine the heat, the shouts of overseers, the clatter of sledges dragging stone. You can almost smell the bread baking in the workers' village nearby, and the faint tang of beer they drank instead of water. Civilization, running on carbs and barley, like some ancient college dorm. You chuckle softly. If you'd been there, you wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes. You'd fake a pulled muscle, lie down dramatically, and beg to be put on water bucket duty. But those workers? They were farmers, roped into Pharaoh's project during the Nile's flood season when their fields were underwater. You imagine them grateful for steady meals, or at least resigned. And somehow, block by block, they stacked a mountain that would outlast kingdoms, religions, and empires. You pause in the sand. The pyramid seems to lean over you, a stone mountain built not by gods or aliens, but by human hands that blistered and bled. And yet, there's romance in that. Not the candlelit kind, but the strange intimacy of thousands of lives woven into one colossal dream. You feel it, this monument is their heartbeat, frozen in limestone. And you realize, this is only the beginning of the story. The desert dawn creeps in slowly, brushing the sky with bruised purples and burning reds. You're still there, pacing the pyramid's massive base, when your mind suddenly turns to a mystery. Where did all this stone come from? You tilt your head and imagine the noise of hammers and chisels echoing off the cliffs, because to raise a pyramid, you first had to carve an entire mountain apart. Just beyond the pyramid plateau, limestone quarries yawned open, their walls hacked and scarred by workers swinging copper tools. You can picture the sparks of sunlight bouncing off bright rock as men shout, sweat, and chip away at boulders the size of your car. This wasn't polite stone cutting, it was brutal labor. You hear the scrape, scrape, crack as wedges are driven in, splitting the stone with a thunderclap. Dust clouds rise into the desert air, and the tang of crushed limestone fills your throat. You cough, wave your hand, and think, yep. Definitely would have quit this job on day one. Here's the clean, mainstream fact: most of the pyramid's limestone was quarried just meters away. Archaeologists have mapped those pits. You could literally toss a pebble from the pyramid and hit the scars in the earth where its stones were born. Convenient, right? But not all the stone was local. Some blocks came from much farther afield. Granite, massive, rosy blocks used inside the pyramid, was dragged from quarries in Aswan, about 500 miles to the south. 500 miles. Imagine being the unlucky guy assigned to move a 60-ton granite slab through desert heat with nothing but ropes, sledges, and possibly, if you were lucky, a donkey. At that point, you'd pray Khufu had ordered a much smaller tomb. And yet, somehow, they did it. The Aswan granite beams still lie inside the king's chamber today, perfectly balanced, weighing more than 10 elephants apiece. Historians still argue whether these were shipped on massive wooden barges or hauled in ingenious stages across desert roads. Either way, the journey itself was almost as impressive as the construction. Now comes the quirky tidbit: some fringe thinkers whisper that the blocks weren't carved at all, but poured. They propose that Egyptians used a kind of ancient concrete, a geopolymer slurry of crushed stone and water that hardened into blocks. If that's true, the pyramid isn't built of quarried boulders but giant Lego pieces molded in place. It sounds wild, but hey, modern tests on a few blocks have hinted at strange chemical traces. Still, the mainstream camp leans hard toward quarrying. And you? You squint into the quarry dust and shrug. Whether carved or poured, the end result still makes your jaw drop. You stumble closer in your imagination, into the quarry itself. The sun beats down mercilessly on workers in simple kilts, their backs glossy with sweat. Copper chisels bend under the strain, needing constant reshaping in fire. Men use dolerite pounders, basalt balls harder than limestone, to bash the rock until chunks splinter loose. Your teeth rattle just thinking about the sound, a never-ending rhythm of clangs, cracks, and groans. Nearby, women and children scavenge chips of stone, carrying them away for plaster or filler. The air smells of charcoal from smelters working overtime to keep up with tool repairs. You pause, imagining how much stone they carved every single day. Let's do a little math. Don't panic, it's gentle math. To finish in 20 years, workers would need to set one block every 2 or 3 minutes. Not every few hours, every few minutes. Day and night, continuously, with a workforce rumored to number 20,000 to 30,000. You laugh nervously. It sounds insane, like trying to build a shopping mall in Minecraft but forgetting to log off for 2 decades straight. As you walk across the quarry floor, your sandals crunch over broken chips. A worker hauls a sledge past you, grunting under the strain. The block on it is huge, its corners still rough, edges jagged. Ropes bite into his shoulders. You step aside quickly, pretending you're helping, though let's be honest, you're just the useless tourist ghost in this scene. Still, you're learning. You notice that the rough stones from the quarry weren't shaped perfectly on site. They were hacked free, dragged, and only finely dressed once at the pyramid itself. Makes sense, you wouldn't waste hours polishing a stone just to have it chip in transport. You grin at the practicality. Egyptians may have worshipped sun gods and animal-headed deities, but when it came to building, they were painfully logical. And yet, this logic doesn't answer everything. How exactly did they get those blocks out of the quarry? Some theories suggest ramps sloping gently up and out, lubricated with mud or maybe even water poured on sand to reduce friction. Others say they dragged them straight with teams of men, their sandals digging ruts in the ground. Nobody has uncovered the full blueprint. Historians still argue whether sledges on wet sand were the miracle hack, a trick proven in modern experiments, or if something even smarter was happening. You lean down and scoop a handful of limestone dust, letting it trickle through your fingers. For a moment you imagine the quarry filled not with sweaty workers but with a strange silence, as if every block was somehow waiting for its destiny. There's something eerie about these empty pits today, as though the ghosts of quarriers still swing invisible hammers in the sun. And here's the cosmic punchline: even though most of the stone came from right here, the pyramid looks like it was dropped from heaven. It didn't matter that the limestone was local. When stacked in that perfect triangular shape, it transcended geography. Local rock turned into a global wonder. You smile, shaking your head. On one hand, it's just digging holes and breaking rocks. On the other, it's art, ambition, ego, eternity. Pharaoh Khufu wanted immortality, and his workers delivered it one quarry crack at a time. And as the desert wind rushes past your ears, you can almost hear the echoes of those first blows, the very first stone ripped free from the earth that would one day rest inside the greatest structure of the ancient world. The desert heat swells again, but this time you're not standing in the dust of a quarry, you're floating. Or at least, imagining yourself floating. The ground slips away and suddenly you're on the Nile, that endless ribbon of life winding through Egypt. Warm water laps at the sides of creaking wooden barges, and sunlight glitters on the river's ripples. This is where the pyramid stones took their next great journey. You lean over the rail, watching limestone blocks and massive granite slabs stacked like sleeping beasts on the deck. The Nile was the ancient superhighway. When the river swelled each year during the floods, Egypt's farmers couldn't tend their fields, so they built, they cut stone, and they shipped. You squint at the shoreline, picturing rows of workers shoving poles into the mud to steady the barges, while oarsmen chant in rhythm to keep the vessels gliding. The air smells of wet reeds and fish, the cries of water birds cutting through the heat. And somewhere, a barge master bellows at his crew, "Row, row, don't you dare drift into the reeds again. Mainstream fact time: archaeologists have found evidence of special canals cut from the Nile right up to the Giza Plateau. That means the stones didn't just sit on boats, they were floated directly into man-made harbors near the construction site. Imagine the foresight. Instead of hauling blocks across endless desert, the Egyptians reshaped the landscape itself. You picture water lapping at the very feet of the pyramid, barges sliding in, blocks unloaded practically at the doorstep. Smart move, Khufu. But here's the fringe twist: some researchers whisper about a lost, massive Khufu Canal, a hidden waterway big enough to carry gigantic granite beams from Aswan straight to Giza. It hasn't been proven, but fragments of papyri, like the diary of a worker named Mira, hint at these supply routes. Others even speculate about water-lifting devices or flood basins that could float stones uphill. And you can't help but grin. It sounds half like genius engineering, half like some kind of ancient water park ride. Of course, historians still argue whether barges alone could handle blocks weighing 60 or 70 tons. Picture the crew realizing their granite slab is heavier than expected. The captain gulps, the deck creaks, and you're there clinging to the side rail like, well, guess I'll swim back to Memphis. Modern attempts to recreate this feat have shown barges can do it, but only with razor-sharp balance and perfect teamwork. The river rolls on, and you let the breeze cool your face. There's something almost soothing about this leg of the journey. You imagine the songs the rowers sang, deep, repetitive chants that matched the splash of oars. Maybe something like, "For Khufu we row, for Khufu we haul, for bread, for beer, for life after all." You chuckle. Okay, maybe their lyrics were better, but the rhythm was everything. Songs kept the oars in time and the spirits steady. The Nile, of course, wasn't just practical, it was sacred. To Egyptians, this river was a god itself, a giver of fertility and a path between life and death. You picture priests pouring offerings into the water, whispering prayers for safe passage of the stones. The blocks themselves almost become characters in this ritual, traveling like holy cargo. A slab of granite from Aswan wasn't just rock, it was a piece of eternity floating toward its destiny. As you drift further upriver in your imagination, you spot camps along the banks. Men rest under palm trees, their sandals kicked off, while others haul ropes and patch sails with rush mats. Women bring baskets of bread, and children laugh, chasing each other along the sandbars. For a moment you realize, pyramid building wasn't only sweat and stone. It was whole communities, families following the work, eating, sleeping, and living by the river as stones drifted past. You think of the worker Mira again, the man whose papyrus diary survived against all odds. His casual notes mention ferrying limestone blocks from Tura to Giza. Just imagine. The only surviving eyewitness account of building the Great Pyramid reads almost like a boring work log. Day 24, delivered blocks to Giza. Day 25, same. You laugh softly. It's the ancient equivalent of texting, "Still at work LOL." And yet, that simple note bridges 4,500 years. You suddenly feel like you know him. Now pause, picture the unloading. The barge noses into a canal slipway, workers leap out, and ropes fly. Sandals dig deep as men haul the cargo onto wooden sledges. The creak of ropes, the groan of wood, the thud of blocks landing on sand, all of it vibrates through the air. You smell sweat, hear the splinter of planks under weight, and wince. How many barges must have snapped? How many stones sank forever into the Nile? Archaeologists still search its bed for those watery graves. And here's a funny thought. If one of those lost stones ever resurfaces, it's going to be the most stubborn, heavy fishing catch in history. You imagine a fisherman tugging and yelling, "I caught something huge," only to realize it's a pyramid block from 2600 BCE. Not exactly dinner. Back on deck, you close your eyes and let the scene fade. The Nile gurgles and sighs, timeless. You realize, this river didn't just deliver stone, it delivered possibility. Without it, there is no pyramid, no wonder of the ancient world. Just an empty plateau of sand. And you, standing there on the shore in your imagination, feel grateful for water, boats, and the stubborn will of men who believed eternity could float, one barge at a time. You're back on the plateau now, the Nile's breeze fading, the sound of barges replaced by the crunch of sand underfoot. In front of you rises something almost stranger than the pyramid itself, a massive ramp stretching into the sky. You squint against the sunlight, watching lines of workers dragging stone blocks upward. This is the next great mystery. How on earth did they lift millions of tons of stone high enough to touch the heavens? The obvious answer? Ramps. Long, wide, back-breaking ramps. You trace one in your imagination, an earthen causeway sloping gently toward the pyramid, packed with mud brick, rubble, and limestone chips. The surface is slick with wet clay to ease the drag of sledges. You hear the grunts of dozens of men straining against ropes, their sandals slipping in the muck, sweat streaming down their backs. Overseers shout, "Heave! Heave!" while waterbearers splash buckets to keep the sand damp. The smell is a stew of earth, sweat, and wood smoke from fires burning to soften the ropes. Here's the mainstream fact: most Egyptologists agree ramps were essential. But how those ramps were designed, that's where the debate roars louder than a desert storm. A straight ramp? Possible, but it would have stretched nearly a mile to reach the top. A zigzagging ramp wrapping around the pyramid's sides? Maybe, though archaeologists haven't found solid traces. A spiraling internal ramp hidden inside the pyramid? Ingenious, but still hotly contested. You laugh softly, shaking your head. Historians still argue whether ramps alone could have worked at such extreme heights, or if some secret mechanism has been lost to time. You imagine a heated debate between two scholars, both red-faced, waving laser pointers at diagrams, while Khufu chuckles in the afterlife, whispering, "You'll never guess it right." And then comes the quirky tidbit: some fringe theories suggest workers used giant counterweights, massive seesaw-like systems, or even water-lift basins, to float the stones upward. A few even claim resonant sound waves or forgotten energy did the job. Okay, that last one feels like science fiction, but you admit, it's fun to picture a group of priests chanting so loudly that a block levitates onto place. You walk closer, and the ramp scene sharpens. You see hundreds of men hauling a single block, their bodies heaving in unison. Their feet sink ankle-deep in the wet sand, ropes cut into their palms, and their breath comes in ragged gasps. At the block's front, a foreman times the rhythm, tapping a drum to keep them moving together. The block itself rides a wooden sledge, its underside greased with animal fat to reduce friction. Even so, every inch forward feels like a small miracle. You smirk to yourself: if you were assigned to one of these hauling teams, you'd last maybe 3 pulls before dramatically collapsing and pretending to faint. The foreman would roll his eyes, mutter something about useless city folk, and stick you on bucket duty. Again. But think about it, moving these blocks wasn't just brute force. It was choreography. Teams had to be timed, shifts had to rotate, ramps had to be constantly repaired. You picture a line of men with baskets of rubble, constantly dumping and packing down the slope to extend it higher. As the pyramid rose, so did the ramp, like a second structure growing in parallel. And when the pyramid was finally finished, that enormous ramp had to be dismantled, stone by stone, basket by basket, until only the smooth-sided monument remained. That means the greatest construction tool in history vanished into thin air, erased as if it never existed. The sun beats hotter now, and you glance up. The pyramid's top feels impossibly far, shimmering in the heat haze. You imagine what it would have looked like during construction, a swarm of humanity crawling up ramps, pulling, pushing, shouting, singing. Dust clouds rising like smoke. From a distance, it might have looked like an ant colony attacking a mountain, tiny bodies conquering the impossible. And here's a thought that makes you smile. Some scholars believe sledges worked best when sand was wet, because water creates just the right level of stiffness to cut friction. In fact, a modern experiment proved it. You can drag a block twice as efficiently on damp sand. Which means, hilariously, one of history's greatest wonders may have hinged on ancient workers basically inventing the world's first slip-and-slide. You stand there, imagining it all, the ramps, the ropes, the endless trudge upward. And slowly, something settles in your chest. The pyramid isn't just about stone, it's about persistence. Imagine building a mountain not with explosions or machines, but with patience, mud, sweat, and clever hacks. Every ramp, every pull, every chant of heave was a heartbeat in the body of the pyramid. And as you glance at its towering edges now, your mind lingers on the questions still echoing through history. How did they really get those blocks so high? Maybe the answer is ramps. Maybe it's something stranger. But for now, you let the mystery hang in the desert air, heavy and unsolved, just like the stones themselves. The ramps crumble away in your imagination, the dust settles, and suddenly your eyes are drawn not to the stone itself, but to the sea of humanity swarming over this plateau. Thousands of figures, sunburned skin, linen kilts clinging with sweat, voices ringing through the hot air. This, you realize, is the heartbeat of the pyramid, the workers. Not nameless slaves, not alien drones, real people. Farmers, builders, bakers, brewers, rope makers. All of them pulled into Khufu's vision like stars circling the sun. You wander into their world. The morning is alive with sound, hammer strikes against copper chisels, men chanting as they haul sledges, the sharp bark of overseers keeping time. The air smells of fresh bread from communal ovens, the sour tang of fermenting beer, and the dry sting of desert dust. You pass by a line of workers eating their rations, flat loaves dipped in lentil stew, mugs of thick, foamy beer in their hands. The drink is warm, grainy, and about as fizzy as wet bread, but after hauling stones under a merciless sun, it tastes like heaven. Here's the mainstream fact: evidence shows pyramid builders were not slaves, but largely free workers, farmers drafted during the Nile flood season, when their fields were underwater and useless. Archaeologists have uncovered entire workers' villages near Giza, with bakeries, breweries, and even medical facilities. That means the people raising this wonder weren't chained in misery, they were fed, housed, and treated with a surprising degree of care for the time. But of course, there's the quirky tidbit: records hint that workers might have been paid, partly in beer, up to a gallon a day. Imagine clocking in at 6 a.m., hauling stones till sundown, and then lining up for your daily jug of frothy reward. Work hard, drink harder, it's the world's first construction site happy hour. You laugh under your breath. Suddenly those perfectly straight pyramid edges make sense. With that much beer, you'd need something steady to lean against. Still, historians argue whether the workforce was closer to 20,000 or 100,000. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, claimed an absurd 100,000 men labored on the pyramid. Modern estimates lean lower, closer to 25,000 rotating in shifts. But no matter the number, the logistics boggle your mind. Feeding, housing, and organizing tens of thousands in the desert. That's not just labor, it's project management on a cosmic scale. You wander deeper into their camp. The sun is punishing, but under makeshift awnings, men sit sharpening tools, women knead dough in clay ovens, and children chase each other through the sand. It feels almost like a bustling town, except every conversation, every meal, every laugh, is bound up in the shadow of that pyramid. At night, you imagine, the workers lay on reed mats, staring up at the same stars you see now, wondering if their names would live on. Spoiler, they didn't. Sorry, guys. A sudden clang pulls your attention, an overseer striking a drum. A new hauling team assembles, ropes looped over shoulders. They groan as they lean forward in unison, dragging a block across the sand. The ground vibrates under your feet. Their sandals slip, dust puffs up, and their shouts merge into one rhythmic roar. For a moment, it feels like the entire earth is moving with them. You can almost sense the camaraderie. Sure, it was brutal work, but there's pride here, too. Imagine knowing you're building the tallest structure on Earth, one that would last for thousands of years. Your arms ache, your back screams, but somewhere inside you, a spark of stubborn joy burns. This is mine. I was part of this. You smirk at the thought, then laugh. If you'd been part of that crew, your contribution might have been questionable. You'd probably sneak off, claiming, "I'm supervising the bread ovens today," or "I'm on pyramid quality control, just lying here in the shade making sure it still looks triangular." The foreman wouldn't buy it. But hey, somebody had to invent workplace excuses. The smell of fresh bread lingers, pulling you toward the bakery tents. You peek inside, women slap dough onto hot clay walls, steam hissing as loaves puff and brown. Children dart in, snatching scraps before being shooed away. Outside, brewers stir massive vats of barley mash, the yeasty scent thick in the air. For a moment, the pyramid fades, and all you notice is the beating heart of community life. And then, you step back, looking again at the workers hauling, chanting, sweating, laughing. You realize the romance of this history isn't in the stone alone. It's in the intimacy of thousands of hands brushing the same ropes, the same bread passed from oven to worker, the same beer jug lifted to countless cracked lips. The pyramid isn't one man's tomb. It's thousands of lives stacked together, immortalized in limestone. And as the sun dips low, painting the desert in molten gold, you can almost hear their voices rising in the twilight. A 1,000-year chorus, a human hymn etched into the sand. We built this. We endured this. We are the pyramid. The workers' songs fade into the night, and now your eyes shift toward the figures who aren't hauling ropes or baking bread. They're standing apart, scrolls tucked under their arms, measuring rods glinting in the sun, brows furrowed in concentration. These are the hidden engineers, the brains behind the brawn, the quiet magicians who turned brute strength into divine geometry. You picture one now, a rope stretcher. His job? To measure perfect straight lines across the sand. He squats low, driving stakes into the earth, then stretches taut cords coated in ochre dust. He mutters to himself, checking alignments with plumb bobs, sighting rods, maybe even the stars. You lean closer, fascinated, realizing this pyramid wasn't raised randomly, it was calculated, every angle measured to the heavens. Mainstream fact: the Great Pyramid's base is aligned to true north with an error of only 3 arc minutes. That's about the width of 2 human hairs at arm's length. Modern surveyors, with lasers and GPS, still struggle to beat that precision. How did ancient engineers do it? Likely with shadow sticks or by watching the stars as they rotated around the celestial pole. However they managed it, the result is staggering, a monument that locks itself into the earth like a compass needle of stone. But here's the quirky tidbit: some fringe thinkers claim the pyramid encodes mathematical constants like pi, 3.14159, or even the golden ratio. They point out that if you divide the pyramid's perimeter by its height, you get a value close to 2 pi. Coincidence? Intentional? Who knows? But the idea of Bronze Age mathematicians sneaking pi into a giant tomb is the kind of nerdy move you can't help but admire. You grin, imagining an architect saying, "Listen, Pharaoh will never notice, but the math geeks in 4,000 years? They'll love this. Of course, historians still argue whether the precision was truly deliberate or just the natural outcome of practical construction. Was Khufu's crew obsessed with cosmic math, or just really, really good at using string? The debate keeps Egyptologists sparring even today. You drift closer to another group, overseers with reed pens scratching on clay tablets. They're tracking rations, shift schedules, and stone deliveries. Project management in the Bronze Age. Without these guys, chaos would have ruled the site. You imagine their complaints: Crew 12 is behind schedule again. And who signed off on 40 extra loaves of bread? The pyramid may look divine, but behind the scenes it was paperwork, paperwork, paperwork. Then your attention shifts to the architects, huddled together with models in their hands. Yes, models. Archaeologists believe small-scale wooden or clay models of ramps and chambers may have been used to test designs. You imagine an engineer squinting at his tiny pyramid, grumbling, "If this ramp doesn't hold, we're all doomed," then casually tossing it aside and starting again. Trial and error, just like any modern project, except failure here meant collapsing stone and crushed workers, not just a missed deadline. You smirk, realizing the engineers probably had their share of office politics too. One swears by a straight ramp, another pushes for spirals, a third insists the gods will sort it out. Meanwhile, Khufu sits on his throne, expecting perfection. The pressure must have been suffocating. Honestly, no wonder some of them might have snuck mathematical Easter eggs into the design. It was either that or lose their minds. The desert sun beats hotter as you linger, and your eyes fall on a surveyor crouched at the pyramid's base. He's checking the corners, 4 of them, set at nearly perfect right angles. Each side measures within a fraction of an inch of the others. You whistle under your breath. Even with today's tools, you'd struggle to lay such a perfect square. Yet here it stands, carved into bedrock, locked for eternity. For a moment you imagine being one of those engineers, your hands stained with ink and ochre, your eyes red from staring at stars all night, your stomach knotted with the weight of Pharaoh's expectations. And yet, when you finally lay down your stylus and look up at the towering stone, you feel a rush of pride. You're not just measuring angles, you're aligning heaven and earth. You chuckle at the thought of how these hidden masterminds might have relaxed after work. Probably not with Netflix and takeout, but maybe with a jug of beer, some roasted fish, and a debate about whether Orion really looked like a hunter or just a bunch of random dots. You can almost hear one sigh: if future people think aliens built this, I'm going to haunt them forever. The sun dips lower, shadows stretching across the sand. Workers keep hauling, bakers keep baking, but the engineers? They watch quietly, making tiny adjustments, whispering numbers under their breath. They're the unsung heroes of the pyramid, not the ones who dragged the stones, but the ones who made sure each stone had its place in eternity. And as you stand there, the air heavy with dust and sweat, you realize something simple but profound: the pyramid wasn't just built with muscle. It was built with minds, sharp, obsessive, restless minds that refused to settle for good enough. That insistence on precision, on harmony with stars and earth alike, is why you're still staring at it tonight, thousands of years later. The desert has cooled now, a thin breeze licking across your face, and yet the pyramid looms warmer in your mind than ever. You've seen the quarry dust, floated down the Nile, trudged up endless ramps, and watched the overseers measure with ink-stained fingers, but what about the tools themselves? You turn your gaze downward, squatting beside a pile of copper chisels glinting faintly in the sand. For all the majesty of the pyramid, its bones were carved by some of the simplest gadgets in human history. Picture a worker gripping one of those chisels. Copper, not iron, not steel. Just copper, a soft metal that blunts faster than a butter knife against granite. The man hammers with a dolerite pounder, sweat dripping off his chin, sparks flashing as stone chips scatter. Every few minutes, he trudges to the fire, reheating and reshaping the chisel before returning to the grind. You can almost hear his sigh, why couldn't Khufu settle for a nice mud brick hut? Here's the mainstream fact, archaeologists have found thousands of copper chisels, dolerite pounding balls, wooden sledges, and ropes at pyramid-era sites. No alien laser beams, no diamond drills, just simple, stubborn tools wielded in overwhelming numbers. The genius wasn't in the tech itself but in its sheer application. Multiply those tools by tens of thousands of hands, working for decades, and suddenly impossible stone begins to yield. But then comes the quirky tidbit, ancient hacks that feel almost playful. Wall paintings show workers pouring water onto sand ahead of sledges. Modern experiments proved this wasn't random, wet sand stiffens just enough to halve friction, letting heavy blocks slide easier. Which means one of the greatest engineering tricks in history boils down to spilling your drink. You laugh softly, imagining some worker tripping with his water jug, then watching in shock as the sledge suddenly moved like butter. Quick, write this down. We've invented Sand 2.0. Of course, historians still argue whether those water tricks were universal, or if some blocks were eased along with logs, grease, or even clay rollers. The evidence suggests multiple hacks, tailored to each phase of the build. You grin, ancient Egypt had its own version of YouTube DIY, 5 genius ways to move a 10-ton stone, number 3 will blow your mind. You wander through this imagined workshop. Men pound granite with round dolerite balls, some weighing 20 pounds apiece, like prehistoric jackhammers. Others carve rope grooves into wood, tightening them with animal sinew to bind sledges. Children twist fiber into cords, hands roar from the work, while women carry baskets of crushed gypsum to make plaster. Even the humblest items, a wooden mallet, a smear of lime, were part of the pyramid's toolkit. The smell of smoldering fires fills your nostrils. Blacksmiths pump bellows, copper glowing orange in clay furnaces. Sparks rise into the night as chisels are hammered back into shape. The clang, clang, clang rings out across the plateau, a heartbeat of industry. You glance at a worker nearby, his face blackened with soot, holding a chisel no bigger than your hand. He sighs, wipes his brow, and dives back in. This is the intimacy of history, grand monuments built with stubborn tools. And here's a moment of humor that sneaks in. Imagine being that poor worker assigned to test whether wetting the sand really helped. Okay, Horam, go spill your jug and see if the sledge moves easier. He spills it, the block glides, and suddenly he's a genius. Next thing you know, his buddies are calling him Water Guy forever. Ancient nicknames never die. But tools weren't just about moving stone, they were about precision. Surveyors used plumb bobs, A-frame levels, and sighting rods to keep lines true. You crouch down, holding an A-frame in your hands. It's simple, 2 sticks forming a triangle with a hanging string. Yet this humble device kept the pyramid's angles consistent across millions of tons of stone. You marvel at the elegance of it. Sometimes the simplest tools change the world. And then, inevitably, your thoughts drift to the wilder edges of theory. Some claim advanced technology was lost, machines of lifting, cutting, and polishing that vanished with time. Others insist strange sound resonance or forgotten chemistry shaped the stones. You shake your head, smiling. Sure, the truth is probably more mud and sweat than sci-fi magic, but admit it, the image of a secret ancient stone laser has a certain late-night charm. The night deepens, stars glinting overhead. You crouch closer to the pyramid wall, brushing your fingers along the surface. Even with crude copper chisels, these blocks fit so tightly you can't slide a blade between them. You whisper to yourself, astonished, with this? This is what they built it with. The wind answers only with silence. And suddenly you feel it, the romance of tools, of hands, of sweat-stained ingenuity. The pyramid wasn't built with futuristic miracles. It was built with humanity's first toolbox, wielded endlessly, creatively, stubbornly. That truth makes the stones more impressive, not less. Because when you strip away the myths, you're left with the simple wonder of humans facing the impossible, and finding a way, one chisel, one rope, one splash of water at a time. You're still crouched against the pyramid wall, your fingers brushing the stone surface, when the night pulls your gaze upward. The sky stretches above you like a black ocean, its stars sharp and cold. And then it hits you, the Great Pyramid isn't just rooted in the earth. It's aligned to the cosmos. Every edge, every angle, every shaft whispers to the heavens. Suddenly, the pyramid feels less like a tomb and more like a giant stone telescope. You step back, craning your neck until it aches. The four sides of the pyramid line up almost perfectly with the cardinal points, north, south, east, west. Mainstream fact, the north-south axis is accurate to within 3 arc minutes. That's the kind of precision surveyors with modern instruments still struggle to achieve. No GPS. No lasers. Just shadows, stars, and relentless patience. You feel goosebumps rise along your arms. Theories swirl in your head. Did they watch the shadow of a gnomon, a tall stick, at equinox? Did they track the rising and setting of specific stars like Kochab and Mizar, marking their midpoint as true north? You imagine a priest astronomer, his linen robe fluttering in the night wind, holding a plumb line against the sky, his eyes locked on twin stars circling Polaris' absent point. His lips murmur prayers, but his mind calculates angles sharper than any sword. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some believe the 3 pyramids of Giza mirror Orion's belt. The alignment is close, not perfect, but close enough to spark endless speculation. Stand here on the plateau, look up at Orion's glittering trio, then back down at the pyramids stretching across the desert. Coincidence? Or was Khufu's tomb meant as a cosmic reflection of the heavens? You grin, imagining an ancient architect proudly gesturing skyward. See? It's like a giant cosmic selfie. Still, historians argue whether these alignments were deliberate, or if modern eyes are simply overreading patterns. After all, humans love finding meaning in stars, just ask anyone who's ever read a horoscope. Were the pyramids really star maps, or just really, really well-built squares? The debate rages on, and you find yourself caught between awe and skepticism. You take a slow walk along the pyramid's edge, letting the night settle over you. In the silence, the pyramid feels alive, as if its angles hum with cosmic energy. You imagine shafts leading from the king's chamber shooting straight toward Orion, Sirius, and other sacred stars. Some of them are blocked now, choked with rubble, but once they were open, celestial highways for a pharaoh's soul. The idea chills you, but in a strangely comforting way. You pause. The air is cool, the desert sand crunches under your sandals. In your mind's eye, the plateau is alive with priests carrying burning torches, chanting as they align ropes and instruments to the night sky. You picture them holding ceremony after ceremony, waiting for the exact star to rise over the horizon before setting the pyramid's corner. These builders weren't just architects, they were stargazers, dreamers, cosmologists in linen kilts. And then your imagination wanders, mischievous as ever. If you were in charge of aligning this pyramid, you'd probably mess it up. Oh, sorry Pharaoh, I accidentally aligned it to the Big Dipper instead of north. My bad. At least now it looks like a giant spoon. You'd be thrown into the Nile before sunrise. Thankfully, real Egyptian surveyors had steadier hands. But the cosmic link runs deeper. Ancient Egyptians believed the pharaoh's soul rose to the stars, specifically to Orion, the celestial form of Osiris, god of the afterlife. Suddenly the pyramid feels less like a tomb and more like a launch pad. Not for rockets, but for souls. Imagine Khufu's Ka shimmering like starlight, rising through the shafts, leaping across Orion's belt to join Osiris for eternity. A tomb, yes, but also a staircase to the heavens. The desert wind sighs, and you tilt your head back again. The stars glitter sharper, the pyramid's edges cut black against the sky. And for just a moment, the entire plateau feels like an observatory, its stones calibrated to eternity. You whisper softly, "This isn't just a monument, it's a compass, a clock, a cosmic prayer carved in limestone." The night deepens, your eyes grow heavy, but the pyramid glows in your mind's eye, not just a pile of stone, but a bridge between earth and sky. And as you drift in thought, the hum of eternity wraps you like a blanket of starlight. Your head still tilted back toward Orion, you wander closer to the pyramid's heart, past the massive stones, toward the dark slits that hint at something hidden inside. Outside, the pyramid is all about overwhelming presence, but inside, it's about secrets. The moment you duck beneath the entrance, the air changes. It's cooler, thinner, whispering of dust that hasn't been disturbed in millennia. You can almost feel the hush of generations of explorers who stepped cautiously, torches in hand, searching for whatever waited in the dark. Your footsteps echo in narrow corridors. The walls press in, steep passageways slanting downward into shadow. You remember how this pyramid isn't hollow like a modern skyscraper, most of its mass is solid stone. And yet, within that mountain of limestone, there are chambers, shafts, and passages tucked like veins in a body. Mainstream fact: 3 main rooms have been identified: the subterranean chamber, the Queen's chamber, and the King's chamber, each with its own mysteries. The subterranean chamber lies deep underground, hacked roughly out of bedrock. You crouch here, feeling the jagged walls, unfinished, almost frantic. Why would they start a tomb below ground, only to abandon it? Did Khufu change his mind mid-project? Or did builders decide to reach upward instead of burrowing down? The riddle lingers in the rock itself. Climbing upward again, your lantern flickers over smooth blocks leading to the Queen's chamber. Smaller, more refined, yet curiously empty. You run your hand along the angled ceiling. Scholars debate its purpose. Was it really for a queen, or a symbolic chamber meant for the pharaoh's soul? You smile at the thought that Khufu might have played an eternal game of hide-and-seek with grave robbers, building false rooms to mislead them. Ancient booby traps, without the Hollywood rolling boulders. But the King's chamber, here the ethicans. The granite walls glisten faintly in your light. Perfectly cut, massive blocks transported from a swan hundreds of miles away. At the center rests a rectangular sarcophagus, carved so precisely it feels like an iPhone made of stone. Empty now. Silent. The most famous burial chamber in the world, without a body. You stand before it, shivering. Khufu's mummy has never been found. Did robbers steal it? Did priests relocate it? Or was it never placed here to begin with? And then the quirky tidbit: from the Queen's and King's chambers stretch thin shafts, narrow tunnels no wider than your shoulders. Some point to Orion's belt, some to Sirius. They're so small a human couldn't crawl through, yet they lead directly to the stars. In 1993, a robotic camera trundled up one, only to find a tiny door with copper handles. Behind that door, another chamber, still sealed. The ultimate cosmic "do not disturb" sign. It feels like Khufu is still chuckling somewhere. You think you've seen it all? Guess again. But here's the phrase that leaves you hanging: historians still argue whether these chambers were symbolic soul roots, storage spaces, or even ventilation systems. Practical or spiritual? Both? the truth may lie behind doors no one has yet opened. Imagine that, for all we know, a hidden void still shelters untouched relics, waiting silently just meters from where tourists shuffle every day. The silence presses in as you sit in the king's chamber. You hear your own breathing bounce back from the granite, a low hum filling the room. Some researchers claim the chamber is tuned like a resonating box, vibrating at a natural frequency. Clap your hands, and the stone itself sings back. Was it intentional? A side effect? Or did the Egyptians know how sound could amplify ritual? You imagine priests chanting in here, their voices swelling into an otherworldly vibration that made the very walls quiver. Goosebumps prickle your arms. And of course, your mind drifts to the wilder edges again. Some fringe theories whisper that the Great Pyramid wasn't a tomb at all, but a power plant, its shafts, chambers, and granite acting like resonators in a vast energy machine. Others claim it stored knowledge, or even alien technology. You chuckle, rubbing your temples. Sure, it's fun to imagine the pharaoh flipping a giant stone switch, Alexa, activate pyramid mode, but more likely, it was ritual, math, and cosmic symbolism all tied together. Still, the hum in this chamber lingers, and you can't quite shake it. You lie flat on the granite floor, eyes closed. The cool stone seeps into your back. In the dark, you picture Khufu himself lying here, the walls vibrating with chants, the shafts guiding his soul upward like beams of starlight. The pyramid, suddenly, doesn't feel empty. It feels alive, buzzing with a purpose you can't quite define. As you crawl back toward the night, torch flickering, you glance over your shoulder one last time. The chambers remain there, quiet, secretive, defiant. They've hidden their truths for 4,500 years, and maybe, just maybe, they'll keep those secrets for 4,500 more. You stumble back into the desert air, lungs gulping the night breeze after the claustrophobic hush of the pyramid's chambers. For a moment, you lean against the warm stone, dizzy not from heat but from thought. All those chambers, shafts, empty sarcophagi, but what they point to most clearly is one man's will. Khufu, also called Cheops. The pharaoh whose divine ego demanded that this giant mountain of stone rise against the desert sky. You squint toward the plateau where his pyramid towers. Imagine being him, ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, son of Sneferu, inheritor of divine blood. Every gesture, every word, every blink carried the weight of a god. At least that's how it was framed. In the Egyptian worldview, Pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was Horus incarnate, living god, a bridge between the divine and the mortal. And what do you do if you're a god on earth? You build something that makes sure nobody ever forgets it. Mainstream fact: Khufu reigned during Egypt's 4th dynasty, around 2589 to 2566 BCE. Records of him are sparse, his statues are tiny compared to the massive monument he left behind. Some historians even say he was ruthless, unpopular, or feared, because his name appears less fondly than other pharaohs. But look at the pyramid itself, doesn't that scream ambition? It's as if Khufu said, "My dad built some pyramids, so I'm going to build one so big, people 4,500 years from now will still be losing their minds over it." Mission accomplished. You walk slowly, picturing Khufu not in gold or on a throne, but in private, maybe staring at the stars himself. Did he imagine his pyramid as a ladder, each block one rung higher toward immortality? Or was it a political flex? A "look at me" monument that not only honored the gods but reminded his people who controlled both heaven and earth? Here's a quirky tidbit: in the 5th century BCE, the Greek historian Herodotus claimed Khufu was so tyrannical that he forced his daughter into a questionable side hustle to fund the pyramid. She supposedly built her own tiny pyramid with the profits. Most modern scholars roll their eyes at that story, but it's a juicy bit of gossip that clings to Khufu's legend. Whether true or not, it paints him as larger than life, half god, half villain, exactly the kind of guy who'd demand a structure visible from space. Historians still argue whether Khufu was a beloved visionary or a despised tyrant. The lack of clear records leaves his personality like a shadow, just enough shape to guess, but never enough to know. Was the pyramid built by willing, loyal workers who adored their god-king? Or by citizens who had no choice, bending their backs for his glory? The debate rages on. You imagine Khufu smirking somewhere in the afterlife, keep guessing. You'll never really know me. As you stroll around the base, you consider the sheer ego of it all. 2 million blocks, aligned with cosmic precision, chambers humming like resonators, all for one man's eternity. In today's terms, it would be like one person deciding to build a skyscraper taller than Mount Everest, just so future generations could say, wow, he really meant business. You grin. If modern billionaires had the same flair, maybe we'd be stepping over pyramids in Times Square by now. Instead, we just get oddly shaped office towers. Weak sauce, compared to Khufu. The pyramid isn't just stone, it's a message. A billboard written in rock. It says, here reigns someone who refused to be forgotten. Even when his body vanished, even when his name was half erased from memory, the structure itself remained, defiant against time, sand, and empire after empire. Think about it, kings, nations, religions have risen and crumbled, but Khufu's pyramid still sits here like an eternal mic drop. The desert night is quieter now. You pause, placing a hand flat on one of the massive blocks. It vibrates faintly with the breath of the earth. You whisper, so this is your ego, Khufu. This is your soul. For a second, you almost feel him listening, amused by your presence, basking in the fact that his name still rolls off tongues thousands of years later. And then your imagination wanders again, cheeky as ever. If Khufu were alive today, he'd probably be one of those people insisting his face belongs on the moon. Or he'd be scrolling Twitter, demanding everyone call him #Pharaoh for life. You laugh softly. Maybe the pyramid is the original viral post, the one thing that truly went global and never got deleted. Your eyelids grow heavy, the desert wind warm against your cheek. But the pyramid looms sharp above you, that eternal ego in stone, daring you to keep wondering, was this a monument of faith, or the ultimate power trip? Or both, fused together in one impossible triangle that still whispers his name under the stars? You turn away from the silent pyramid and wander downhill, where the sand softens under your feet and the desert hum begins to shift. It isn't empty here, far from it. The hidden city of workers stretches out before your mind's eye, a place once alive with the clatter of bread ovens, the laughter of children, and the shuffle of thousands of tired but determined feet. If Khufu's pyramid was his ego in stone, then this village was its beating heart. Mainstream fact, archaeologists have uncovered worker settlements just south of the pyramid complex, complete with bakeries, breweries, barracks, and even cemeteries for those who died on the job. These weren't slave pits. They were organized, bustling communities where laborers ate surprisingly well. Imagine rows of round ovens glowing, women slapping dough flat, the smell of fresh bread cutting through desert air. Huge vats of beer bubbled, liquid bread, basically. Workers were paid in rations of bread, onions, and beer, and lots of it. Not glamorous, but enough to fuel muscles that hauled limestone day after day. You stroll between imaginary rows of mud brick houses. Children scamper barefoot. Dogs bark. The murmur of daily life surrounds you. This is the part tourists rarely picture, the human story. Without these villages, the pyramid would still be just a dream in Khufu's mind. And here's a quirky tidbit. Scientists examined cattle bones found near the site and realized the workers ate prime beef. Not scraps, not leftovers, quality cuts. For common Egyptians, beef was rare, a luxury. But pyramid builders? They were fed like athletes. Some scholars suggest this was a deliberate strategy to keep morale high, like ancient corporate catering. Picture a foreman announcing, "Finish this ramp section and tonight, steak." Maybe they didn't have pizza parties, but a juicy cow roast in the desert must have hit the spot. As you move through the village, you hear the creak of copper chisels, the slap of rope, the rhythmic grunts of teams pulling sledges. The pyramid wasn't raised by faceless slaves, it was raised by real people who lived in dorms, who argued about chores, who told jokes by firelight. Historians still argue whether these workers were seasonal farmers pressed into service or permanent crews of specialized laborers. Probably a mix. Either way, they weren't shackled in chains, they were organized, fed, and buried with honor when they died. You pause at one of the cemeteries. The graves are modest, but the people buried here had medical care, broken bones healed, signs of surgeries. Doctors lived among the workers. One skeleton even showed evidence of an amputated leg, healed enough to suggest the man lived for years afterward. Ancient healthcare. That alone smashes the grim Hollywood image of slaves whipped until collapse. Instead, you picture exhausted laborers trudging home, washing dust from their faces, and then sitting down to stew and beer, swapping stories, maybe gossiping about Pharaoh's latest decree. The village also had bakeries large enough to produce thousands of loaves per day. The smell alone must have blanketed the camp: yeast, ash, sweet grain. Imagine being a child growing up there. Your lullaby isn't silence, but the low thunder of stones dragged, the hiss of fires, the chatter of languages from all across Egypt. Because workers weren't just locals, they came from the Nile Delta, the Fayum, Nubia. The pyramid was a national project, binding the kingdom together. And now your humor kicks in. You picture the world's first employee lounge, a shaded spot where workers leaned on blocks, complaining about supervisors. These ramps are too steep. The bread's stale again. If Khufu wants 2 million blocks, he should move some himself. You grin. Some frustrations are timeless. The hum of life here is so vivid you almost forget the pyramid looming behind you. This wasn't just stonework, it was a community experiment, one that left fingerprints still visible in the dirt. Potsherds, tools, beer jars. It's like stumbling into the backstage of the world's greatest performance, where you realize the actors weren't gods or giants, but ordinary humans, sweaty and determined, driven by bread, beer, and maybe a little pride. You glance back up the slope, where the pyramid glows pale under the moon. Without these villages, it would have been impossible. Without laughter, bread, and broken bones healed by care, Khufu's ego might never have reached the sky. That's the real magic. You realize, the pyramid isn't just about stone. It's about people. Thousands of hands, voices, and stories stacked invisibly into every block. You leave behind the bustle of the worker village, your imagination still humming with the smell of bread and the clatter of chisels. But the moment you step back into the wide desert silence, another set of voices creeps in, voices from centuries later. Because for all the evidence dug up in the sand, not everyone is convinced by the tidy picture of farmers turned builders. Myths cling to the pyramid like desert dust, refusing to blow away. Some are laughable, some are sinister, and some, well, they make you tilt your head and wonder. Mainstream fact first: for generations, popular culture insisted the pyramids were built by slaves, often portrayed as Israelites suffering under Pharaoh's whip. It's a dramatic image, Hollywood loved it, Sunday schools repeated it, but archaeology says otherwise. No chains, no mass slave quarters, no evidence of brutal imprisonment. The builders had medical care, hearty meals, and even honored burials. Not exactly slave conditions. Yet, the myth stuck, echoing for millennia. You grin at the thought. Maybe the world just likes a juicy underdog story. The oppressed masses rising up, or in this case, being forced down, make for good drama. But reality? More like a state-driven project where citizens contributed, sometimes willingly, sometimes because taxes and duty left no choice. Less epic tragedy, more government construction job. And yet, people keep asking, but what if? Which leads to the second myth, our quirky tidbit of the night, aliens. Oh yes. Somewhere along the centuries, someone stared at those perfectly cut blocks, aligned to true north with razor accuracy, and said, "No way humans did this." Cue flying saucers descending onto the Giza plateau, little green men handing out laser levels. Entire books and TV shows ride on this. You can almost hear the dramatic narrator, could it be extraterrestrials? You smirk, because part of you wants to roll your eyes, but another part kind of loves the idea. It's deliciously absurd, and yet, surprisingly enduring. People point at the weight of the blocks, the precision of the angles, the astronomical alignments, and claim it's beyond Bronze Age technology. But archaeologists have demonstrated, again and again, that ramps, ropes, copper tools, and lots of sweaty teamwork can account for it. Still, the myth sticks because, let's be honest, it's more fun to imagine aliens with tractor beams. Historians still argue whether myths like these were deliberate inventions, propaganda shaped by later rulers, or just misunderstandings snowballing over centuries. Maybe later dynasties wanted to smear Khufu as cruel, so they exaggerated the slave angle. Maybe alien theories are just modern humans struggling with the uncomfortable thought, people 4,500 years ago might have been smarter than us at some things. That one stings the ego, doesn't it? And here's where you get playful. Imagine a modern Egyptian worker listening to a tourist ramble about aliens, so you're saying my ancestors couldn't stack rocks without help from ET? Please. You laugh softly. If anything, the alien theory might actually insult the memory of the workers who bled, sweated, and broke their backs for years to build something so stunning it still makes people gape. To deny their achievement is to erase the very human triumph encoded in each block. But myths persist for a reason. They make the pyramid feel mysterious, untouchable, not just engineering but magic. If it was all ramps and bread rations, maybe it would lose a little of its shine. So people add layers, slaves groaning under lashes, aliens zapping stones into place, secret brotherhoods hiding knowledge under limestone shells. The myths are like a second pyramid, invisible but towering in our imagination. As the night deepens, you tilt your head, half joking, half serious. Maybe myths themselves are part of the monument. Maybe Khufu wanted to be remembered as larger than life, even if that meant people would believe he was cruel, or that his pyramid was built by beings from the stars. In a way, both legends achieve the same goal, they keep him unforgettable. The desert wind sighs around you, stirring the sand, almost like a whisper, stories are stones too. And suddenly, you realize that the pyramid isn't only built of limestone, it's also built of myths, stacked and restacked by every generation that stares up at it and asks, how? The myths fade like echoes in the sand, but something else gnaws at you, the gaps. For all the stones, the shafts, the villages unearthed, the Great Pyramid still holds its secrets close. It's like staring at a puzzle missing half its pieces. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And that, more than aliens, more than Hollywood, keeps people awake at night. Mainstream fact, the pyramid has never been fully mapped inside. We've explored the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, the descending passage. We've sent robots into shafts no human could crawl through. And yet, massive swaths remain untouched. In 2017, scientists using muon tomography, a fancy word for cosmic ray scanning, discovered a giant void above the Grand Gallery, at least 30 meters long. Nobody knows what's in it. Empty space. Hidden chamber. Structural gap. It's still there, silent, waiting. You press your palm against the stone, imagining whole rooms humming behind it, unseen. Were they left empty to lighten weight? Were they storage chambers? Or something more symbolic, maybe spaces meant to confuse robbers or even protect secrets? Historians still argue whether the void is a deliberate chamber or just an accidental gap in the masonry. Either way, it's thrilling. Even after 4,500 years, the pyramid says, "Nice try, but you haven't figured me out yet." Now for a quirky tidbit. In the 19th century, explorers tried blasting through the walls with gunpowder. Literally. They thought secret rooms would spill open like pinatas. Instead, they damaged priceless architecture. Imagine spending years with copper chisels, ropes, and math, only for Victorian adventurers to waltz in with TNT. It's almost slapstick if it weren't so tragic. You can't help but chuckle at the mental image. Careful lads, we might blow up eternity itself. Boom. Dust everywhere. A foreman coughing. A disappointed silence. Ancient Egyptians would have rolled their eyes so hard. But the unknown stretches further. What exactly was the pyramid for? Tomb? Yes, that's the mainstream. But where's Khufu's body? No mummy, no treasure, not a scrap. Did robbers steal everything within centuries of burial? Or was the pyramid never meant to hold his corpse at all? Some fringe theorists suggest it was a cenotaph, a symbolic tomb. Others claim it was a power plant, a water pump, a repository of lost wisdom. Some even say it vibrates like a tuning fork with Earth's energy. Too weird? Maybe. But the lack of definitive answers leaves the door wide open. You wander through the Grand Gallery in your imagination, its steep corbelled ceiling towering over you. It feels less like a corridor and more like a cathedral. The echoes stretch forever. You whisper, and your voice booms back like a ghost. What was this space for? A ramp to lift the king's sarcophagus? A ceremonial passage for the pharaoh's soul? Or something we haven't even guessed yet? Your thoughts spiral outward. The pyramid is the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing. But why did Khufu's work survive while others crumbled? Was it sheer luck? Superior design? Or maybe, just maybe, because it hides more than stone? Jokingly, you imagine Khufu smirking in the afterlife. I buried my secrets so deep you'd still be arguing in the 21st century. Mission accomplished. You sigh. Fair play, Pharaoh. The unknown chambers, the missing mummy, the puzzling voids, together, they keep the Great Pyramid alive in the modern mind. If we had every answer neatly packaged, maybe people would stop wondering. But the pyramid thrives on mystery. Every grain of sand seems to whisper, you don't know everything. And that's exactly why you're still here, wide-eyed in the dark, chasing questions like fireflies across a desert sky. You keep circling the pyramid in your thoughts, still tasting the mystery of hidden chambers and echoing voids. But tonight your gaze shifts skyward, because the Great Pyramid isn't just about stones stacked on Earth. It's about alignment, about geometry, about the heavens themselves stitched into its very bones. Mainstream fact, the Great Pyramid is aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points, north, south, east, west. The precision is uncanny. Even with GPS, lasers, and satellites, the accuracy today barely surpasses what Khufu's engineers achieved with shadows, stars, and sheer patience. The sides differ from true cardinal direction by less than 0.2 degrees. That's the kind of accuracy that makes modern surveyors whistle under their breath. You imagine the builders standing in the desert at night, eyes locked on the stars. Maybe they watched the rotation of constellations around the pole star, tracing invisible lines across the sky. They probably used a plumb line, a simple tool, to sight the exact moment two stars crossed the meridian. And then, stakes-driven, cords stretched, they fixed the pyramid's base forever in harmony with cosmic order. And here's your quirky tidbit: some argue the shafts in the king's and queen's chambers were air shafts. But they don't reach the outside in some cases, so air? Not really. Instead, they point directly toward stars sacred to the Egyptians, like Orion's belt, linked to Osiris, god of rebirth, and Sirius, linked to the goddess Isis. Imagine lying inside that chamber, staring into blackness, knowing that somewhere, perfectly aligned, was a star symbolizing eternity. It wasn't just architecture, it was religion in stone. Historians still argue whether the alignments were practical, spiritual, or both. Were the shafts intended to ventilate or to guide the pharaoh's soul to join Osiris among the stars? Maybe they did double duty, because honestly, why not? Egyptians loved symbolism layered like onions. You smirk at the thought, build me a cosmic ladder, but also, maybe make it breathable in there. Thanks. A pharaoh could dream big. And then comes the wild speculation, Orion's belt. A famous theory suggests that the three pyramids at Giza mimic the three stars of Orion's belt. The spacing, the size, the alignment, it does line up eerily well when mapped against the night sky. Some researchers claim this was deliberate, a giant mirror of heaven on earth. Others roll their eyes, coincidence. But once you see the stars over the desert, it's hard not to believe the builders were gazing upward as much as outward. The air cools in your imagination, and you picture workers pausing at night, lying on their backs in the sand, staring at Orion striding across the sky. Maybe one nudges the other, see? That's us. We're building the stars down here. And suddenly the work feels less like drudgery, more like a brush with eternity. The pyramid, then, isn't just a tomb. It's a compass, a clock, a telescope carved in stone. The Nile itself flows north like a celestial river, and the pyramid aligns to it like a faithful map. The desert becomes a stage, the heavens the script, and Khufu the star of the show. Joke break, you can't help picturing an ancient foreman lecturing his team, "Okay guys, let's just line this up with Orion." And one worker mutters, "Bro, I can't even line up my sandals." Cosmic precision, achieved by men who probably had sand in their ears 24/7. Respect. As the night deepens, the pyramid doesn't just loom, it glows, its angles humming with geometry. You can almost feel the numbers vibrating, pi, phi, the golden ratio, hidden in its proportions. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's genius. But standing before it, you realize the Great Pyramid isn't just rooted in the desert, it's rooted in the cosmos. A bridge between sand and sky. And you whisper, half in awe, half in surrender, this isn't just engineering, it's astronomy you can walk inside. And now, as the sky above Giza darkens in your mind's eye, you lean back against the cool stone, the whole journey settling on you like a heavy but comforting blanket. You've trudged through dusty worker villages, marveled at stone ramps, laughed at alien theories, squinted at hidden chambers, and now you're ready to let it all sink in. Because the truth is, the Great Pyramid isn't just an ancient monument. It's a mirror. A mirror of human ambition, of mystery, of obsession, of eternity itself. Mainstream fact to ground us, for over 3,800 years, the Great Pyramid stood as the tallest man-made structure in the world. Nothing else touched it until the spire of Lincoln Cathedral in England finally surpassed it in the 14th century. Think about that, more than 3 millennia of unmatched dominance. Every cathedral, every tower, every skyscraper since, has been, in some way, trying to top what a Bronze Age culture pulled off with rope and sweat. But here's a quirky tidbit to keep you smiling. Napoleon, standing before the pyramid in 1798, reportedly said, "Soldiers, from the top of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you." Dramatic, yes, but he also supposedly locked himself alone inside one chamber for a night. When he stumbled out the next morning, pale and shaken, he refused to speak of what he'd seen. Legend says he carried the secret to his grave. Maybe it was claustrophobia. Maybe bats. Or maybe just the crushing awareness of eternity pressing in on him. Whatever it was, it shows the pyramids still had the power to rattle even the most iron-willed conquerors. And the debates, oh, they never end. Historians still argue whether the Great Pyramid should be seen as purely functional, a tomb and nothing more, or as something layered with cosmic, symbolic, even mystical meaning. Was it just a house for a mummy, or was it a carefully tuned instrument meant to connect earth and sky? Maybe both. Maybe neither. That's the beauty of it, you can never quite pin it down. You sigh softly, imagining Khufu smirking from beyond time. His monument wasn't designed to give answers, it was designed to last, to outlive questions themselves. And in that, he succeeded spectacularly. And here comes your last little laugh. Picture an ancient Egyptian worker, bone-tired at the end of the day, wiping sweat and saying, "No one's going to believe how hard this was." And here we are, thousands of years later, debating aliens. Somewhere, that worker is rolling in his simple desert grave, muttering, "Seriously?" But you smile, because even myths are part of the magic. The pyramid isn't diminished by them, it's enriched. It stands both as a literal mountain of stone and as a mountain of stories, impossible to climb completely. And maybe that's exactly why it endures. Now, let your breathing slow as you imagine the desert at night. The tourists are gone, the chatter has faded, and only the wind curls around the limestone edges. The pyramid rises against the velvet sky, its silhouette sharp, its silence deep. You tilt your head back and see the stars, Orion, Sirius, the slow wheel of the heavens, and for a moment, it feels as if the pyramid itself is breathing with you, timeless and calm. The workers, the pharaohs, the explorers, the dreamers, they've all gone. But the stone remains, glowing faintly under the moon, humming with secrets you don't need to solve tonight. You just need to rest in the wonder that humans, dusty and mortal as we are, once dreamed something so big it could outlast the centuries. And they pulled it off. So let your eyes close now. Picture yourself lying on soft desert sand, the pyramid keeping watch beside you, steady and eternal. Let the wind brush over your skin like a lullaby, let the stars blur into a sleepy haze, and let your thoughts soften until they're as quiet as the chambers sealed deep inside the pyramid. Because in the end, you don't need all the answers. You only need the comfort of knowing that mystery itself is a kind of beauty. The pyramid whispers it to you, steady as your heartbeat. Some things last forever, and that is enough. Sleep now, dream now, the sands of time are wide, and you are safe within them.